discrimination, including prevention and responses to hate crimes, aggressive nationalism, chauvinism, and also in a combined part, of course, also Roma and Sinti issues, including the implementation of the OSCE Action Plan on improving the situation of Roma and Sinti across the OSCE area. Ladies and gentlemen, this year, and it's a year of jubilees in many ways, most of them, of course, tragic and harmful. This year marks the 17th anniversary of the liquidation in the death camp of more than 23,000 Sinti and Roma in Auschwitz-Birkenau. This tragedy is for many Roma and Sinti symbolic for the persecution of their people under the Nazi regime, and in general for racism, discrimination and persecution they faced over centuries. Many of you have been in Auschwitz-Birkenau this year. I know that also the ambassadors of the participating states, many of them on the trip to Warsaw, did pay a visit there. And I think it is really important, of course, that this is really maintained and, of course, also visited in order to keep this memory alive. This year also marks an important decision of the OSCE participating states taken then at the Budapest Summit in 1994, namely the decision to create the ODIHR contact point for Roma and Sinti issues. And this to enhance knowledge between participating states on effective integration of Roma and Sinti, and to monitor the implementation of inclusion policies and advancement with combating racism and discrimination against them. With this decision in 1994, the OSCE participating states acknowledged their responsibility and need for targeted and effective policy measures to bring equal opportunities for Roma and Sinti. Yet, despite all efforts, the OSCE participating states are far from eradicating discrimination against Roma and Sinti. And the global economic crisis has revived and fueled trends of increased anti-Roma rhetoric by populist politicians and extremists or violent manifestations against Roma and Sinti. ODIHR observed the mobilization of citizens targeting Roma neighborhoods with discriminatory slogans or scapegoating of Roma migrants in the public discourse. In this context, the number of hate crimes against Roma and Sinti reported by the civil society is further disturbing. And ladies and gentlemen, when you speak about hate crimes, of course, then very clearly also this session further aims in general at reviewing the implementation of OSCE commitments relating to responding and to preventing hate crimes in the all OSCE area, to prevent aggressive nationalism, racism and chauvinism. Throughout the region, individuals and communities continue to be targeted, and this is way beyond the Roma and Sinti issue, on the basis of their origin, ethnicity or religion. ODIHR remains concerned about such manifestations, strongly concerned, and we do something. ODIHR has annually reported on hate crimes in the OSCE region. This year, and this is a very substantial effort, we launched a hate crime reporting website at www.hatecrime.osce.org, which has allowed us to more effectively deliver on our tasking to serve as a collection point for information and statistics on hate crime. Participating states' hate crime data are accessibly presented on individual country pages on this website, and I recommend you to see it, to look to it. Reports from civil society organizations illustrate there the individual cost and impact of hate crime, and our In Focus stories showcase innovative responses to the problem. I would like here to thank this opportunity all of you who have provided input for this 2013 hate crime report, which will be launched online in November. We are grateful for the submissions received from 32 participating states, and I really urge those who haven't yet provided ODIHR with information to do so before our final deadline in mid-October. In particular, I want to emphasize the importance of contributions by our partners from OSCE Field Operations, UNHCR and IOM, and more than 100 civil society organizations and groups who provided information for this annual hate crime report. The website revealed substantial gaps in the reported official hate crime data. Reports by civil society, international organizations, etc. are often the only source of information about hate-motivated incidents in some participating states, and therefore I think this website is really an upgrade in the fight against hate crime, intolerance, discrimination, and therefore let us work together in really make this functional also in those places where it does not yet work. And I want to take the opportunity to thank all of those in ODIHR and of course within your ranks, be it participating states, be it NGOs, who helped to realize this endeavor, and again it will be online, fully operational from mid-November. With these words, of course, I would like to pass then to pass the floor. Before I give it to Mr. Stefanos Stavros, our moderator, I would like to introduce both of our persons here today next to me, from my side to my left. We are glad to have today as an introducer to this topic Thomas Hammarberg from Sweden, well-known and diplomat and human rights activist. He currently serves as a United Nations senior expert on human rights in Transnistria and as the EU Special Advisor on Constitutional and Legal Reform and Human Rights in Georgia. In addition, he has been appointed by the Swedish government as head of the Government Commission Against Anti-Gypsyism in Sweden. I thank you very much, Thomas, that you are here today with us, and we are keen to hear later, of course, your introduction. But before I give the floor to Stefanos Stavros, let me say also some words about our moderator. He's currently serving as the Executive Secretary of the European Commission Against Racism and Intolerance of the Council of Europe. In this organization, he served as the head of the Penology and Criminology Division, where he was dealing with prison reform and crime policy, and also the head of the Central Division of Administration. Let me, Stavros, at this occasion also thank you for the very good cooperation with the Council of Europe. We are working hand in glove in this area. We are not doubling our efforts. We are having a good interface. We are try to avoid double work in order to make us mutually stronger by reinforcing our efforts and really working very closely. And I feel privileged to be in Strasbourg next week in the Council of Europe and there to be able to speak as well. So in this case, first of all, the floor is first to our moderator. Thank all of you for your attention, and I wish you and all of us a successful working session this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Director. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for attending this session today. It promises to be a very interesting session, and already I have to tell you that the list of speakers will have to close after Thomas Hammarberg makes the introductory speech. Why does this session promise to be so interesting? Looking at it from the interinstitutional perspective to which the Director made allusion, of course, the Council of Europe, my organization, has done a lot of work in this field. For example, you have the case law of the Court of Human Rights on Roma, you have ECRI's general policy recommendation on dealing with anti-Gypsyism and anti-Roma discrimination, but also here in the OSCE you have an action plan which very nicely complements the standards of the Council of Europe. We have also been asked to introduce a gender perspective in today's discussion, how anti-Gypsyism affects in particular Roma women. Also, when it comes to hate crime, ECRI monitors the situation in all member states of the Council of Europe concerning racist violence, homophobic violence, hate speech. But as the Director said, here in the OSCE, you have an interesting and very useful for us system for collecting statistics on hate crime. And certainly this is something that should be discussed today, how to improve the response of the participating states to this collection effort. We also have this dimension of chauvinism and aggressive nationalism, which we have not explored sufficiently in the Council of Europe. We also have the personal representatives of the chairmanship, and one of the topics could be how these personal representatives can help states meet their commitments. So as I said, because of all these dimensions, all this added value that this meeting has to what the Council of Europe also does, because of our good cooperation with the OSCE and ODIHR, I think that this is going to be a very enriching and helpful session. And without further ado, I'm going to give the floor to the introducer, Mr. Thomas Hammarberg. And please bear in mind that after his introduction, we will have to close the list of speakers. So if you want to put your names down, please do so while Mr. Hammarberg makes the introductory remarks. Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you. I must say in the beginning that I'm very pleased that this item has been put on the agenda in spite of the urgent developments in the neighborhood. Because the sad truth is that Roma and Sinti people in large part of the Europe are still suffering systematic discrimination. They are, in fact, denied basic human rights and are victims of flagrant racism today. And as a consequence, they remain behind others in the society in terms of educational attainment, housing, employment, health standards. They have no proportional representation in public and political life in any country in Europe today. In social terms, they tend to be marginalized. Indeed, a number of them are still stateless or do not even have documents to prove their identity. When attempting to migrate, they are discriminated against and often refused entry or expelled. And their exclusion from society feeds isolation among Roma and Sinti people and their communities, which in turn encourages prejudice against them among xenophobes. More effort is needed to break this vicious cycle. And this, of course, is an enormous challenge. Xenophobic and extreme nationalist tendencies in today's Europe have worsened the situation for the Roma and Sinti people. They're not seldom targeted in hate propaganda by neo-fascists and other extremists. They have suffered brutal hate crimes which have not even spared children. Many of these assaults are not reported to the police because there is a lack of trust among them towards the law enforcement in their society. The problems are not new, and they have been on the agenda of OSCE and several other international bodies, including the Council of Europe, for a number of years. But these discussions, investments in time and money, have produced little results. Inequalities seem only to increase. Frustration is widespread, not least among Roma and Sinti themselves. OSCE's Action Plan on improving the situation of Roma and Sinti in the OSCE area was adopted in 2003. 5 years later, its implementation was formally evaluated by OSCE. Though some progress was noted, not least the fact that member states had adopted action plans for integration of these minorities, and also that anti-discrimination legislation had been adopted in very many of the countries. The overwhelming picture was that the concrete situation for Roma and Sinti had not really improved. Among the problems highlighted in this evaluation report 2008 were continued forced evictions, lack of secure land tenure, inadequate alternative housing, lack of civil and voter registration, and inability of Roma and Sinti children to attend school. Agreed plans had little influence on the local authorities. On that level, they were received with apathy and neglect. Generally, there was a lack of institutional mechanisms for a sustainable progress. This was said in the report 2008. Another 6 years have passed, and my very clear impression is that there are these and several other problems remaining. There should no longer be any confusion on what actually ought to be done. We know, for instance, that education is absolutely crucial in order to break the vicious cycle, and that preschooling should be given high priority. Efforts here must, of course, be enhanced. We have already decided that the automatic placement of Roma children in special classes of schools is wrong and should be stopped. We know that it is important for the poor minority children that they can have something to eat in school for breakfast or lunch. We have understood the value of school mediators and personnel with minority background involved in the school system. We also sense the need for further scholarships to allow poor pupils to continue their education. We know also the chain effects. If a child does not receive sufficient schooling, she or he will be disadvantaged in the job market in the future. If they cannot get a job, they cannot improve their housing situation. Poor housing conditions in turn affect the health and also the education for the next generation to come. Again, a vicious cycle. Consequently, we have also understood the importance of adult education. Too many parents cannot read and write. We have learned that there is a need of a comprehensive approach to address the combined problems of bad housing, lacking health care, unemployment, and poor education. On housing, a great number of Roma and Sinti live in unhealthy, slum-like environments, in many cases without electricity, water, and proper sanitation. Their tenure rights are not seldom questioned, and evictions continue without alternatives having been offered. A vicious cycle again. We know that the expected life length of people of this minority is considerably shorter than for the majority population. We understand that this is because of illnesses and diseases which have not been prevented or cured. Roma and Sinti are still disadvantaged in the health service. They cannot pay under the table. They may not have an ID to prove that they have the right to access. And they may, based on experience, fear a hostile reception when they knock at the hospital door. We are aware of the gender aspect as well, the great importance of schooling and health care, which also reaches girls, and that Roma and Sinti women have a voice in the broader society as well. We should also understand the sad fact that Roma and Sinti have become losers on the job market. Several of their traditional jobs have disappeared, and they have difficulties to compete in the neoliberal economy. Poor education is, of course, a disadvantage in that situation, but even educated Roma and Sinti have had difficulties to get employment. Obviously, the real reason there is anti-Ziganism, anti-Gypsyism. My conclusion is that the attitude of the majority population is a key obstacle to progress. Prejudices against this minority are deep and widespread in Europe. Even politicians are heard promoting slander against this minority, not least in periods of elections. The social gaps and injustice are a consequence of anti-Ziganism, anti-Gypsyism. This has to be a major aspect in all strategies and action plans. One aspect is to make known the Roma Sinti history and their culture. In Sweden, a white paper was recently published about the treatment of Roma in the country during the last century. Enforced sterilization, registration on ethnicity grounds, evictions, obstacles to schooling and employment, etc., etc. The knowledge about this dark history will now be widely disseminated and also part of the curricula in the ordinary schools. Furthermore, the government in Sweden has appointed a commission to combat anti-Ziganism in society today. The 9 members of this commission have already recognized that Sweden is not free from the ugly racism against members of this minority. And they have already received striking examples of everyday discrimination, both on the private sector and from authorities. The 2008 evaluation of the OSCE Action Plan highlighted the work of the police in this field. It warned against racial profiling and abusive treatment of Roma Sinti cases. Our experience is that it's particularly important that the policemen are well educated about minority rights, well educated. The Swedish Commission has already had reason to react against ethnic registration and profile approaches from the police. Another institution of importance in any efforts to combat anti-Ziganism or anti-Gypsyism is, of course, the media, which could be helpful in giving information of real situations, but could also spread stereotyped images of minority individuals, for instance, linking crimes to Roma. Proper self-regulation in the media has turned out to be wanting in several countries in this regard. One key phrase in the OSCE Action Plan is for Roma, with Roma. That approach is necessary if results are to be reached. Authorities must work together with Roma groups who would know what ought to be done and naturally dislike gadget lecturing by so-called Roma experts. There are non-governmental organizations with Roma representatives which too often are ignored by the authorities. Having just returned from a study visit to Romania, I feel deeply sad about the continued misery among Roma communities there, but at the same time encouraged after having met some officials, both locally and in governmental circles, who are prepared to contribute to sustainable solutions with creativity and resources. There are in that country also impressive non-governmental initiatives being taken in protection of these minorities. Strategy papers and action plans must be turned into real changes and reforms. The 2008 evaluation report stated that many strategies are implemented in an ad hoc, symbolic manner with little hope of long-term sustainability. Symbolic manner with little hope of long-term sustainability. The time for symbolism should be over. Political will for genuine implementation must now be mobilized. Political will. This is an urgent matter of basic human rights, but also necessary in order to protect harmony in our societies. We cannot allow anti-Ziganism to continue.
Thank you very much, Thomas, for this very enlightening introductory speech. You all know that Mr. Hammarberg was the Human Rights Commissioner of the Council of Europe, and we can really see that the experience that you have gained by occupying this post is well reflected in your current approach to these issues. And also the current commissioner, Mr. Nils Muiznieks, who used to be the chair of my commission of ECRI, continues along these lines with a firm commitment to improving the situation of Roma and Sinti in Europe. I would like to thank Thomas for bringing in also the hate crime perspective, because quite often Roma people are the prime victims of hate crime. And as we have agreed, this session is going to cover hate crime in general against Roma, but also against other vulnerable groups. And also it is good to remember that aggressive nationalism also with which we should be dealing at this session targets often historical minorities such as Roma. Another thing that I wanted to thank Thomas for is for sticking to his time. He promised to speak for 12 minutes, and this is what he did. So now we are going to open the list of, we are going to invite people from the list of speakers. You are going to have 2.5 minutes each. And although I'm the Secretary of the Commission for Tolerance, I already announced that I will be intolerant vis-à-vis long statements. So please, when you speak, introduce yourselves, your name and the organization. Try to keep your comments brief and to the point. Of course, criticism is welcome, but should be constructive. And please don't read the prepared statements. This can be handed over and will be distributed by the OSCE organizers to all the participants. So I start with the United States, who will be followed by Ukraine. So, United States, please, you have 2.5 minutes.
Not enough time for this subject, but thank you. I thank Director Link for referring to the visit that many of the OSCE ambassadors and I took to Auschwitz and Birkenau before coming here to Warsaw. It's a terrible reminder of the horrors that can result when we fail to protect human rights and combat hatred in all of its very ugly forms. I want to just say this in terms of history. Germany today is one of the most peaceful nations in the world, according to The Economist magazine. This can happen in any of our countries, but Auschwitz did not happen overnight. It was incremental. Please read the history of the 1930s, when you had people who were suffering from economic difficulties, partially imposed by the Allies who'd won the previous war. But there was also an extreme appeal to nationalism. And I think this underscores the dangers of propaganda when it's directed at your own people. Hate speech creates a very slippery slope, and it can result in hateful acts, violence. And when governments use this type of rhetoric, they send a message to ordinary people that it's okay to attack your neighbors. We've seen this happen throughout Europe, even in the United States on occasion. Victims have been Roma, Jews, people from the gay community. And when you think about these communities, you have to understand that no one chooses to be born the way they are. They don't choose to have a particular skin color, a particular religion, or a particular sexual orientation. And what we have in common in all of our societies, particularly if we call ourselves democratic societies and members of the OSCE, is our humanness. And if we cannot treat all human beings equally, we're going to suffer ourselves. We have a Latin saying on our coin in the United States, a pluribus unum, out of many one. And that, it seems to me, applies to all of us. I want to say one final word, if you don't mind me going on beyond 2.5 minutes. I think it's important. We've seen action in places like Hungary and Russia, where laws have been passed restricting the rights of the gay community. The reaction to these laws are hate crimes. People attack those people, and they think it's all right because the government has said so. So I think it's important to understand what this discussion is all about. It's about the Helsinki Final Act call for the inherent dignity of the human person. And I must say, finally, final word, as a Catholic, I was disappointed to hear that the Holy See has objected to language at the OSCE condemning hate crimes based upon all forms of intolerance. I know, having listened to Pope Francis, that he would not approve of that position, and I would hope certainly that the church at the OSCE would change its position on this business of hate crimes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I forgot to announce that the list of speakers is closed, but I thought that we had understood that. So now we are going to have Ukraine, followed by Giuseppe Dossetti, Observatory for Religious Tolerance and Freedom. So Ukraine, 2.5 minutes, please.
Уважаемые коллеги, вопросы противодействия межэтническим и расовой дискриминации, а также дискриминации по языковым и религиозным признакам находятся на постоянном контроле президента Украины, правительства страны, а также соответствующих центральных органов исполнительной власти. В исполнении международных обязательств Украина относительно разработки и принятия антидискриминационного законодательства 6 сентября 2012 года Верховным Советом Украины принят закон Украины о принципах предотвращения и противодействия дискриминации в Украине. В 2014 году внесены дополнительные изменения. До недавнего времени в Украине наблюдалась позитивная динамика развития межнациональных отношений и снижения количества случаев проявления ксенофобии. Но в результате временной оккупации Российской Федерации, Автономной Республики Крым и города Севастополь, агрессии РФ на востоке Украины, ситуация с обеспечением прав национальных меньшинств в указанных регионах, особенно в Крыму, ухудшилась. Дискриминации подвергаются украинцы и крымские татары, а также люди, которые придерживаются проукраинских взглядов независимо от национального происхождения. Ужасающим по своему цинизму примером является случай в Донецке, где российские наемники приковали к фонарному столбу жительницу Донецка Ирину Довгань, которая придерживалась проукраинских взглядов, подвергая ее публичным пыткам, избиениям и истязаниям, чему есть многочисленные фото и видеоподтверждения. Только широкий общественный резонанс позволил освободить бедную женщину, которая сейчас вынуждена проходить курс психологической реабилитации. И подобных примеров множество. Вчера представитель РФ в сфере защиты прав человека призвал расследовать массовые захоронения славянские. Это случайно не то захоронение, где были найдены изуродованные тела 2 протестантских служителей, а также 2 сыновей местного пастора, замученных боевиками русской православной армии. Есть и другие свидетельства. 16 июля 2014 этого года вооруженные боевики в Горловке Донецкой области разгромили церковь «Новое поколение». 17 июня в городе Донецке боевики захватили христианский реабилитационный центр «Вечерний свет». 3 июля представители ДНР в городе Донецке захватили в плен греко-католического священника Тихона Кульбаку, который провел 2 недели просто в нечеловеческих условиях. Оккупационными властями в Крыму осуществляются целенаправленные действия, направленные против коренного крымского татарского, а также украиноговорящих граждан, которые можно квалифицировать как расовую дискриминацию. В этих сложных условиях Украина благодарна международному сообществу за поддержку и решительное осуждение военной агрессии России. Вместе с тем мы призываем международное сообщество предпринять дальнейшие срочные и действенные меры, чтобы остановить агрессию России, которая цинично пренебрегает основополагающими принципами и нормами международного права и обязательствами ОБСЕ. В то же время Украина, как полноправный член ООН, Совета Европы и ОБСЕ, готова и дальше выполнять свои обязательства, взятые в рамках этих организаций в сфере противодействия ксенофобии. Вопросы обеспечения прав народа Рома также постоянно находятся в фокусе внутренней политики Украины. Ромскому национальному меньшинству гарантированы такие же социально-экономические и культурные права, как и другим национальным меньшинствам. Вместе с тем, учитывая, что ромы в Украине по сравнению с другими национальными меньшинствами менее адаптированы, вопрос обеспечения их социальной интеграции является актуальным для нашей страны. Ранее Украиной уже предпринимались попытки по обеспечению процесса их интеграции. В период с 2003 по 2006 год реализовалась программа социально-духовного возрождения ромов Украины. Однако, несмотря на...
Can you please conclude?
Yes, I go to conclude. Основная цель принятых документов в последнее время в Украине – создание условий, которые способствовали бы решению проблем в получении ромами документов, доступу к образованию, медицинским услугам, то есть помогли бы народу Рома полноценно интегрироваться в украинское общество. Спасибо.
Thank you very much. The Giuseppe Dossetti Observatory, followed by Romania, who will speak also on behalf of the European Union.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. In the OSCE area, many people are subject to threats or acts of discrimination, hostility, or violence as a result of their identity. All these phenomena undoubtedly threaten the social cohesion inside each participating states. Some of them may also erode the confidence between states and trigger violence and conflict on a wider scale. In accordance with its feature as a security organization, OSCE should develop a specific response to those phenomena that can undermine peace and stability of the Euro-Atlantic and the Eurasian region. In combating hate crimes, primary responsibility rests with the participating states. It is not satisfactory that they do not commit violence themselves, but they have a positive duty to protect the individuals within their jurisdiction and punish the perpetrators. To this end, training on hate crimes for law enforcement agencies like TACL, for prosecutors like the new launched PACT, and civil society plays an essential role. Moreover, participating states are required to do their best efforts in order to prevent the hate crimes from being committed through educative programs, awareness campaigns, and so on. Attention should be paid to the social environment where hate crimes take place. Violence does not suddenly arise. It is a tragic final act of a slippery slope. Allowing certain expressions reinforces patterns of intolerance and discrimination, which in turn cause violence against certain groups. According to indivisibility, interdependence, and interrelation of human dimension commitments, promotion of tolerance and non-discrimination cannot be used or interpreted in a way that could restrict freedom of expression. If it is difficult to draw a legal limitation, anyway, every person should be encouraged to exercise responsibly her or his freedom of expression. The promotion of mutual respect is not a dot with, but a part of freedom of expression. Finally, let me mention the importance of data collection in order to understand and address hate crimes. The new website launched by the ODIHR is an important tool, but underreporting and under-recording undermine its effectiveness. Therefore, participating states have to improve efforts on data collection through measures such as increased involvement of civil society, enhanced disaggregated data, and development of a national action plan. Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you very much. We have Romania, followed by the Russian school in Estonia.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairperson, the following EU statement is also on behalf of Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, former Yugoslavic Republic of Macedonia, Montenegro, Norway, Ukraine. Mr. Chairperson, please note that this list of aligned states is not final. The full list of aligned states will be provided on the full written version of this statement. I have the honor to refer to the implementation of the OSCE Action Plan on improving the situation of Roma and Sinti within the OSCE area, which the EU remains fully committed to. Roma and Sinti issues remain high on the agenda of the EU. A solid policy, legal and financial framework has been put in place at both EU and national levels. Many member states have developed their own national Roma integration strategies, while others are taking the issues through wider social inclusion policies. The European Commission publishes an annual assessment of progress in each member state. The EU has managed to strengthen its financial support for Roma inclusion not only in 28 EU member states, but also in enlargement countries. We also recall the decision adopted by the OSCE Ministerial Council in 2013 on enhancing OSCE efforts to implement the action plan, with a particular focus on Roma and Sinti women, youth, and children. Our recommendations are the following. Enhance efforts to implement all OSCE commitments, in particular the action plan, as well as continue to regular review of its implementation. In this context, participating states should respond promptly and comprehensively to ODIHR's request for information. Enhance the complementarity of the OSCE Action Plan and the EU framework for national Roma integration strategies. Enhance implementation of the OSCE commitments by local authorities. Enhance data collection in all fields of the action plan as far as this is in compliance with the legal framework and overall policy of a member state. Include, where appropriate, a monitoring and assessment component in strategies, policies, measures, and programs related to Roma and Sinti, as well as review mechanism taking into account the respective results of monitoring and assessment. As far this is necessary by taking into account any existing monitoring mechanism, especially in the framework of the European Union. enhance efforts to increase enrollment for Roma and Sinti children and youth at all levels in state-provided education and reduce school dropout rate, enhance efforts to eliminate segregation of Roma and Sinti at all levels in education, enhancing, where appropriate, the participation of Roma and Sinti in the elaboration, implementation, and evaluation of the policies that affect them, prevent further marginalization and exclusion of Roma and Sinti, and address the rise of discrimination and violent manifestation of intolerance against Roma and Sinti, including against Roma and Sinti migrants, enhance efforts to strengthen the rights of Roma women and girls and to eliminate discrimination on multiple grounds, enhance cooperation among international organizations, continue activities of the OSCE field operation with regard to improving the situation of Roma and Sinti. Mr. Chairperson, the EU supports ODIHR's work in the field of tolerance and non-discrimination and believes that our shared values and principles are integral to OSCE's objective of building more stable, pluralistic, and democratic societies. We regret that discrimination is still widespread in the OSCE area, including in EU member states. We therefore call on participating states actively to cooperate with ODIHR in implementing our shared commitments to promote mutual respect and understanding. In times of economic difficulties, the danger of rising racism and intolerance manifestations fueled by increasing economic insecurity are very real. In these challenging times, our efforts to fulfill the commitments must be relentless. We highly value the work carried out by ODIHR in preventing hate crime across the OSCE region. We are aware of the importance of reliable data on hate crimes in the fight against intolerance and non-discrimination and fully support ODIHR's activities in the field. The EU has a solid legal framework to combat discrimination on grounds of sex, racial or ethnic origin, disability, age, religions of belief, and sexual orientations. We would like to reiterate our steadfast commitment to the global fight against racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and other forms of intolerance. The EU remains convinced that the fight against all manifestation of extremist, racist, and discrimination-based ideologies must be a common and consensual priority for all of us. And finally, our three recommendations are the implementation of commitments against all forms of intolerance, strengthen the capacity of ODIHR to deal with T&D issues and ensure better synergy between the chairmanship, personal representatives, and ODIHR structures, and publicly speak out against hate crime, whatever the motivation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your efforts to stick to the time limit. We understand that to this statement a lot of different actors contributed. So now I call upon the Russian School in Estonia, followed by the Russian Federation. So the Russian School, 2.5 minutes, please.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alisa Blintsova. I'm from NGO Russian School of Estonia. The matters of preventing aggressive nationalism are not addressed in any way by Estonian authority. On the contrary, for the practice of the aggressive nationalism, different and the new justification are continuously invited. For example, preservation of the Estonian people, the Estonian language, and the Estonian culture. Altogether, the Estonian nationalism is so aggressive that, taking into account other factors, it is already possible to speak about evolution into Estonian Nazism. The direction for aggression of Estonian nationalism is beyond doubt. It is a Russophobia for which the development of countermeasures has to be added to the agenda of OSCE for a long time. The aggression of Estonian nationalism is revealed practically in everything, in particular in pursuits of activists of the Russian community of Estonia, preventing contacts with Russian compatriots, and last but not least, in the simulation of human rights institutions by Estonian officials. Russian community activists are often persecuted in Estonia through the fabrication of criminal cases. For example, I myself was persecuted on an absurd charge of forging on my own signature. The statement of the police was signed and sent by the Minister of Education in reaction to the petition received by the Ministry asked to preserve Russian language of instructions, which was sent by the Board of Trustees of our school, where I am a member. In addition, we are constantly dealing with persistent violation of the privacy of correspondence, spending many hours of humiliating body searchers at the border, facing dismissals from work, etc. I should add that also speeches given here in this room do not remain without attention of the Estonian authority. A last year's speech given here by the Russian ombudsman in Estonia, Sergei Sridenga, was cited as a contributory to Estonia in the annual book issued by the Estonian Security Police, which is an equivalent to receive a black mark, and it is also a prosecution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The Russian Federation, followed by France. Russian Federation.
Уважаемый господин председатель, в контексте сегодняшней темы серьезную тревогу вызывает героизация нацистских преступников и их пособников. Так, например, церемония прощания в Эстонии с Нугиском, эстонским легионером 20-й дивизии СС, прошла с государственными почестями, что нельзя расценить иначе, как глумление над памятью миллионов людей разных национальностей, в том числе Синти и Рома, которые были зверски замучены в годы войны нацистами и их приспешниками. В сложившейся обстановке тем более тревожит попытки властей ряда стран преследовать правозащитников-антифашистов или представителей СМИ, пытающихся осветить пронацистские мероприятия. Ежегодно по главной улице латвийской столицы проходит марш легионеров Waffen-СС. В Эстонии, в местечке Синемяе, легионеры эстонской 20-й дивизии СС проводят свои традиционные сборы. В Литве проходит шествие националистически настроенной молодежи под крайне радикальными лозунгами. Во многих государствах Евросоюза также регулярно проходят митинги неонацистских групп. Тревожит также возрастание числа неонацистских группировок на пространстве ОБСЕ, например, в Испании, Германии, других государствах Евросоюза, а также США. Только национал-социалистическое движение в США насчитывает более 400 членов в 32 штатах, среди целей которого лишение евреев и афроамериканцев гражданства. Глубоко симптоматично, что погромы и провокации против милиции в Киеве возглавляли экстремисты, действующие под российскими лозунгами Степана Бандеры, лидера крайне радикальной организации украинских националистов, запятнавшей себя сотрудничество с нацистами, на совести которой сотни тысяч людей разных национальностей. Центральное британское издание The Daily Telegraph подтвердило участие европейских неонацистов в карательной операции против Новороссии. Например, символикой батальона Азов является символика дивизии СС Das Reich. В этом контексте хотели бы отметить, что распространение наемничества не только способствует развитию таких процессов, как религиозный фундаментализм, терроризм, агрессивный национализм в странах, где оно применяется, но и со всей очевидностью несет угрозу тем государствам, откуда, собственно, происходят сами наемники. По нашей информации, только в Сирии и Ираке в настоящее время находится около 15 тысяч иностранных боевиков, среди которых около 2 европейцев и около 100 американцев. Попустительство распространению человеконенавистских идей со стороны властей, как мы видим, не только могут, но и расцениваются определенными слоями населения, включая молодежь, как вседозволенность и поощрение к распространению радикальных взглядов. В этой связи хотели бы напомнить о выводах спецдокладчика Совета ООН по правам человека по современным формам расизма Рутиере о том, что любое торжественное чествование нацистского режима, его союзников или связанных с ним организаций, будь то официально или неофициально, должно быть запрещено государством. Более того, подобные практики подпадают под положение статьи 4 Международной конвенции о ликвидации всех форм расовой дискриминации. Согласно данной статье, любые попытки прославления бывших нацистов и нацистского движения должны преследоваться в уголовном порядке. Что касается сделанных США и рядом стран Евросоюза оговорок статьи 4, квалифицирующих такое действие, как проявление права на свободу выражения мнения, то эти оговорки были признаны Комитетом по ликвидации расовой дискриминации как несоответствующие предметам и целью упомянутой конвенции. Призываем партнеров отозвать такие оговорки. Настало время объединить наши совместные усилия по пресечению деятельности праворадикальных и неонацистских течений. Спасибо.
Thank you very much. Je donne la parole à la France. Vous avez 2 minutes et demie, and you will be followed by the Czech Republic.
Merci monsieur le modérateur. Bonjour à tous. Ma délégation souscrit pleinement à la déclaration de l'Union européenne et aux excellentes recommandations qu'elle contient, bien évidemment. La France, à titre national, souhaiterait informer cette enceinte des mesures que le gouvernement français a prises en 2013 contre la montée des actes d'intolérance en France. Tout d'abord, je rappelle que la France ne privilégie aucun motif de discrimination par rapport à un autre, qu'il soit antisémite, anti-musulman, anti-chrétien, anti-rom ou homophobe. Tous les actes d'intolérance et de discrimination sont dénoncés avec force par les autorités publiques et font l'objet des poursuites judiciaires qui s'imposent. Outre le cadre juridique solide dont elle dispose, la France a pris l'an dernier plusieurs mesures pour renforcer ses outils de lutte contre le racisme. Premièrement, elle a adopté un programme d'action complémentaire au plan national d'action contre le racisme et l'antisémitisme. Aux côtés du volet répressif, elle établit plusieurs programmes d'éducation et de sensibilisation, y compris à destination des forces de police, afin de lutter contre les préjugés. Deuxièmement, elle a affiné encore ses outils statistiques pour mesurer l'efficacité des politiques pénales de lutte contre les actes racistes. Le ministère de l'Intérieur et les institutions judiciaires disposent maintenant de statistiques désagrégées que nous avons communiquées au BIDDH. Elle a mis en place un outil de signalement des propos racistes sur Internet afin de lutter contre leur diffusion. Enfin, elle établit une étroite concertation avec les institutions représentatives des musulmans et des juifs de France afin de conjointement élaborer un suivi des violences et de définir les mesures de protection nécessaires concernant les lieux d'éducation et de culte. Enfin, je voudrais signaler que nous avons un dialogue étroit et régulier avec les institutions représentatives des chrétiens, mais aussi avec les associations représentant les personnes LGBTI, afin de mieux lutter contre les atteintes les concernant. Pour finir, je voudrais signaler que ma délégation fera circuler une note complémentaire très complète sur notre politique en faveur des populations Roms et Sinti. Merci, Monsieur le modérateur.
Merci beaucoup. The floor is to the